Good morning, friends. Just into this idea of sharing Dharma with the world, with everything that's been happening in the last couple of years. Just feels, I'm sure many of you know the feeling of helplessness that has arisen with the political situation and, of course, the pandemic, etc. And so I've been practicing Dharma, meditation, Buddhism for 15, 16 years, and I've put it out in my music a lot. It's kind of always, it's really been in my many of my releases for 15 years, but I wanted to start just sharing ideas or my understanding about things and some of my practices. Not because I'm trying to convert anyone, it's just makes me feel that I'm trying to do something to help the situation in the world, and particularly the confusion and toxicity of the internet. Feels like it's worthwhile to try to put out stuff to counteract the delusion and division that is running amok in our society. So anyways, I'm sharing practices that I do with people, and many of them are quite conventional. Like, I've studied a lot of traditional Buddhism and different traditions, and done meditation retreats, and primarily Vipassana, but starting in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, who I consider my root teacher. And I also study in the Tibetan tradition, and currently I'm more focused in the Tibetan tradition right now, but which I'll be talking about a little bit coming up, because I'm planning to do a Nundro practice, which is a really fascinating and esoteric trajectory. But one of the things that I'm doing, a goal I've set for myself, is to chant the entire Pali Canon. And the Pali Canon is the collection of sutras that are the oldest known teachings, going back to the incarnated Buddha of planet Earth, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the one that people commonly know as Buddha. And the Pali Canon is a collection of books, and I'm by no means a scholar about any of this, but there are many of them. And to give you an example, today I'm chanting from the Sutta Nipata, right here, translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's really an extraordinary being that has translated these ancient texts for the entire into the English language. An extraordinary accomplishment and treasure for the West. But you can see the size of this book. It's extremely huge, and there's like 6 or 7 of them. So the Pali Canon is gigantic. There's a lot of repetition, but there is also just extraordinary gems of wisdom like throughout it. It is extremely profound. One of the things I'll say when reading through the Pali Canon is, especially for someone who's new to the practice, it can come across as hard to process and digest, because it's very counterintuitive to how we experience normal life, worldly life, as they call it. And of course, it's primarily, most of the teachings are geared towards people that are going to become monks and essentially give up a life of possessions. But it also offers a lot of wisdom and help for lay people. That's normal people like us, non-monks. And also, so when you read it, there's a lot of transposition that you don't need to do, but is valuable to do within your life, because the wisdom is so vast. It's like, as they say, like the ocean of Dharma, and it can be applied in many different. I mean, in every moment, you have an opportunity to essentially apply the practices, even of the teachings to monks. You realize how there's kind of like there's this relative description devoted to the path of a bhikkhu or a monk, but you realize that whenever you're practicing in any moment, you are a bhikkhu. So it does apply to all of us. Again, a bhikkhu is a Pali word. Pali is the language that the original text, the Pali Canon, was written in. So anyways, so this is the Sutta Nipata, and I'll talk more about it as I go through it. And I just happened to be on chapter 1, which is called the chapter on the serpent. And the Pali for that is Uragavaga. Probably pronouncing that wrong. And I happen to be on one of my favorite sutras in the entire Pali Canon that I've been chanting daily. One second. I got a humidifier for the instruments. Called the Metta Sutta, Loving Kindness Sutra, and I mean, this is commonly chanted by many people daily. The goal to chant the Pali Canon came about because, first off, I'm a musician, and so I've done a lot of studying and practice of sound meditation, sound healing. My work Bardo is really grounded in like that research into sound healing, studying with some great masters in that field. And during that time, which was 7 years ago now, or 8 years ago, I really developed this relationship with mantras and chanting and tuning into the power and the experience that is a fruit of that practice. As they say, mantra is like vocal prayer. It's quite fascinating how it works, and I hope to speak more about this if I can keep this up for those out there that might be interested. But so anyways, I'm chanting the Metta Sutta today, and yes, excuse me. So chanting the Pali Canon. So the really fascinating thing about Buddhism is that early on, for something like 200 to 300 years, all these sutras were handed down orally only. They were not written down at all, and that is extraordinarily phenomenal accomplishment in human history when you realize the size of these things. And the way that they say it was done was that they would put the monks that had the greatest capacity for memorization in charge of leading smaller groups of monks. So they would break it, the monastery or the sangha would be broken up into select groups, and a monk with a higher capacity for memorization would guide there was a group of them that would get together to, formalize or solidify the teaching, and then they would teach it hand down, and you'd all have to chant together, and that was how they maintained the memorization. Like if you're chanting something and someone left and right of you is chanting with you, regularly, you have an easier capacity to be able to memorize it, and therefore if someone made a mistake within the group, they'd be corrected by the larger group. So like collectively, they were able to maintain a memory. I know that scholars say that this was really, really extraordinary accomplishment, and they were able to know what was the authentic, relatively authentic, no one knows, teachings going back to 560 plus BC when the Buddha was alive, by examining the Pali Canon that emerged in Sri Lanka, the island off the south of India, and the versions of sutras that went into China, so the opposite directions from India. Again, Buddha emerged in northern India. And so by comparing those versions, they can see what was authentic, because a lot of it matched, and they obviously had gone in completely different geographical directions. So, so there's this great long tradition of chanting the Pali Canon. And so I've taken upon myself to chant it and read it. There's many notes in here, because it can be quite obtuse and hard to understand at times. So I'll sometimes stop and read the notes. Usually I'll read through the sutra and then read the notes. Just depends on what I'm feeling. But I'm also just improvising, and there's every time. So I mean, I don't care. There's no concern about mistakes. It's just literally the act of vocalizing it. I think the vocalization also, in a way, is a little bit deeper than reading, except for if you've ever been a singer, a songwriter, you know that you can sing and really not be paying attention to the meaning of words at all. So sometimes I'll catch myself kind of being distracted or not paying attention. So, or if I come across something that's really profound, I'll repeat it over and over again. Again, like a chorus in a song, or like a mantra, I'll repeat like the line in the Metta Sutta: "May all beings be happy and secure. May they be inwardly happy." Is the BQ Bodhi translation. I do use 4 translations of this sutra, but I'll repeat that over and over like a song. And I also like to repeat it in Pali. I'll sing many of these in the actual Pali language, which I love to do. It's actually my preference, but I don't understand enough of it to really get the deep meaning out of it simultaneously. But vocalizing it again really internalizes the meaning in a different way. It kind of vibrates it into your cells, because I mean, every single word is a symbol in your mind, as you know, and a word sparks the blossoming of concepts and perceptions and understanding in your mind. For instance, if I say pink elephant, of course that manifests in your mind. If I say love, you have a certain perception of what that is, or conceit, or generosity, or etc., etc. They water different seeds of perception in your mind, and so hearing the actual sound of the word can really help for that to manifest a little bit deeper. So that's my current practice of chanting the Pali Sutta. It's not necessarily it's not interesting music. It's not really meant to be. It's just a method of vocalizing. Sometimes I use an instrument. Sometimes I could chant just a cappella, just with the voice. Generally these days I really enjoy chanting with just the guitar, because it's really simple and easy to hold, and the Shruti box. So I give it a chance. I try it out. If you get a chance, if you know just one chord, if you're not a musician and you can learn one chord or even one note. I mean, I could sit here and just do that with one note. Anyone can do it, and you don't have to also chant the Pali Canon. You could chant Christian text, or philosophical text, or just the word love, or a wish for your child or your parent or husband, any kind of just psychological positive intention. And you could chant a novel if you wanted, but there's obviously, this is a mind practice essentially, so we're trying to cultivate a more resilient, equipoised or balanced and happy and joyful mind. So that's the point of this whole practice. So it's reciting and remembering the positive qualities that you're trying to cultivate, and then as we learn in Buddhism, really remembering also the negative qualities and being able to be aware and seeing the negative qualities is actually quite profound, or quite helpful. In many ways more helpful, because when you know what to clear away and what to recognize that's not helpful, the helpful is immediately in a way revealed. So there is a lot of like negative positing in classical sutras, but the reason being, like I said, is that like hatred or non-love essentially reveals love once you can really notice the subtle emanations of aversion, dislike, discrimination. And then peeling back those layers allows one to open up and realize a wider, more equalized and non-discriminatory love. So so I'm gonna chant the Loving Kindness Sutta, the Metta Sutta, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.